My sister stole my identity and ran up $78,000 in debt. My parents said, just forgive her, she's family. I filed a police report. At her arraignment, they showed up to testify against me until the judge asked one question that made my mother stop crying and start shaking. The letter came from a bank I had never used. That's the detail that stays with me. Not the amount, not the handwriting I would eventually recognize, not even the moment I understood what had happened. Just the logo on the envelope. A bank I had never walked into, never opened an account at, never given my social security number to. I almost threw it away. I almost put it in the recycling pile with the credit card offers and the insurance mailers that arrive in a steady stream that I have stopped reading because none of it is real, none of it is mine. I opened it because something made me open it. Late payment notice, current balance, $1,800, minimum payment due, $370. Account status, 47 days delinquent. My name at the top, my address, an account number I had never seen. I called the number on the letter at 7:14 p.m. on a Tuesday, standing in my kitchen in the apartment I had worked double shifts to afford, and the woman who answered read back my social security number and my birthday, and my full legal name with the practiced efficiency of someone who does this 40 times a day and is not prepared for the silence that follows. Is that correct? She said. Yes, I said, but I didn't open this account. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, and I want you to understand what it felt like to hear these words in sequence, the specific way each one landed. I see 2 additional cards connected to this SSN profile. Would you like me to pull those as well? By the end of that phone call, I owed $78,000 I had never spent. I sat on the kitchen floor. Not dramatically. There was no decision to sit on the floor. My legs just stopped working in the way that legs sometimes stop working when the thing that just happened is too large for the body to process while standing. I sat on my kitchen linoleum at 7:41 p.m. with the phone in my lap and 3 account numbers written on the back of an envelope, and I stayed there for a while. Then I called the fraud departments. And then, the following afternoon, when the fraud department at the second bank emailed me copies of the original applications, I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the handwriting on the form. I have known that handwriting my entire life. My sister Madison had been building a comfortable life on my identity while I worked double shifts to keep my credit clean. Let me tell you about Madison first, because this story is not comprehensible without Madison, and because I have spent 29 years trying to understand her in ways that have not ultimately produced understanding, but have at least produced clarity, which is a different thing and in some ways more useful. My name is Emily Castillo. I am 31 years old. I work as a paralegal at a mid-sized civil litigation firm in Columbus, Ohio, a job I got through the specific combination of a community college degree, 4 years of night classes while working days, and the kind of institutional stubbornness that develops in people who have learned that nothing is going to be handed to them and who have decided to stop waiting for it. I grew up in a house where that lesson was applied selectively. My parents, Robert and Diana Castillo, are people I can describe most accurately by saying that they have always loved Madison more, and that they have never acknowledged this, and that the gap between those two facts has been the primary weather system of my entire childhood. My father is a retired postal worker. My mother manages a dry cleaning business that my grandmother started in 1979. They are not wealthy, but they are comfortable, and they have spent those comfortable years demonstrating, in small daily increments, that comfort is distributed unevenly in our family. Madison is 28. She is the younger daughter, the one who got the specific kind of parental attention that expresses itself as unlimited tolerance, the kind that says she's going through a hard time at every hard time, which in Madison's case has been continuous since approximately 2009. She dropped out of 2 colleges. She has held by my count 11 jobs in 7 years. She borrows money from my parents and does not pay it back, and this is never discussed. She is not, in my considered assessment, a stupid person. She is a person who has never had to be accountable to anything, and who has therefore never developed the particular muscles that accountability builds, and who has arrived at 28 with a sophisticated understanding of how to present herself as a victim of circumstances while being the primary architect of those circumstances. I say this not to be uncharitable. I say it because it is accurate, and because the story I'm about to tell you is not comprehensible if you think of Madison as someone who simply made poor choices. She made strategic ones. I had a credit score of 791 when the letter arrived. I want you to understand what that number represents, not as a brag, but as a context. It represents 9 years of paying every bill on time, of not buying things I couldn't afford, of putting the new laptop back on the shelf because the timing wasn't right and using the old one for 2 more years, of building something carefully in the specific way that people build things when they have no safety net and understand that the building is the safety net. Madison knew my credit score. She had asked about it once over the phone in the casual way of someone gathering information they want to appear not to be gathering. I told her because she was my sister and I didn't understand yet what she was collecting it for. The fraud department documents arrived in a priority mail envelope on a Thursday. I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope in front of me for about 4 minutes before I opened it, which is the time it took me to understand that I was afraid of what was inside, and to decide that being afraid of the truth was a luxury I couldn't afford. 3 credit card applications, each one printed on the bank's standard form, each one bearing my name, my social security number, my date of birth, my address, my old address, the one I had lived at 2 apartments apartments ago, which I had given Madison once so she could mail me something and which I had not thought about since. The handwriting was distinctive. Madison has always written her sevens with a European cross, a habit she picked up from a boyfriend who spent a year in France, and that she maintained long after he was gone because she liked how it looked. Every 7 on those applications had a cross through it. I know my sister's handwriting. I have seen it on birthday cards and grocery lists and the notes she used to leave on my childhood bedroom door. I did not need a forensic expert to tell me what I was looking at. I looked at it for a long time anyway. Then I started listing what she had bought. The itemized statements the fraud department sent covered 16 months of spending. Designer handbags, 3 of them, the kind with waiting lists, the kind that cost more than I make in a month. Furniture, delivered to an address I didn't recognize. Electronics, a television, 2 laptops, an iPad, AirPods. Hotel stays in Nashville and Chicago and Miami during dates that corresponded, when I checked Madison's social media later, to trips she had posted about and captioned, "Needed this escape so badly." Cash advances, 4 of them, at ATMs around the city, totaling $12,400. She had spent 16 months building a life using my name. Every purchase made with the comfortable certainty of someone who has done the math and decided that the consequences will land somewhere other than on them. She was right about that for a while. My hands were flat on the table and the kitchen was very quiet, and I thought about my credit score, 791, 9 years of careful construction, and I thought about the apartment I was afraid of losing, and the car loan I was afraid of being denied, and the promotion at the firm I was trying to position myself for, and what this kind of debt on my profile would do to all of it. Then I picked up the phone and called my sister. I want to be accurate about what happened at my parents' house, because accuracy matters, and because I have been accused of misrepresenting it by people who were not there and have their own reasons for misrepresenting it. I called Madison and told her I needed to see her in person. I did not tell her why. She agreed to meet me at my parents' house because that is where she had been living again for the previous 4 months. I drove over on a Saturday afternoon with the documents in a folder in my bag. My parents were home. I had not expected this. I had thought Madison would be alone, but they were in the living room when I arrived, and the specific arrangement of the room when I walked in told me something before anyone spoke. My parents side by side on the couch, Madison in the armchair across from them, a triangle already formed, a configuration already established, like they'd been waiting. I sat in the remaining chair and I took the folder out of my bag and I put the applications on the coffee table. Madison cried before I finished my first sentence. Not the slow, genuine kind of crying, the immediate deployed kind, the kind that arrives before the thing being cried about has fully been articulated, which tells you something about the mechanism of it. She covered her face. Her shoulders shook. My mother put her hand on Madison's knee. She was desperate, my mother said. Just like that. 4 words. No preamble, no question about what the document said, no acknowledgement that I was the one who had been stolen from. My mother looked at my sister crying and said she was desperate, as though desperation is a legal defense that I was obligated to accept. "You have a good job," my father said. "You can recover." I looked at him. I have spent my whole life looking at my father the way you look at someone through a window that is slightly fogged. You can see the shape of them, you can see where they are, but the detail is never quite as clear as you need it to be. He said you can recover with the confidence of a man who has decided that the conversation is already over and is now just explaining the conclusion to me. "Do you understand," I said, "that my credit is destroyed, that I may lose my apartment, that the firm I work at does background checks and this debt affects my professional standing, that I could be sued by these banks for money I didn't spend?" My mother looked at me with the specific expression she has always reserved for when I am saying something that inconveniences the story she has already decided is true. "Just forgive her, Emily," she said. "She's family." That sentence broke something in me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, structural thing. The way a hairline crack in concrete is invisible but changes the load the concrete can carry. Something had been holding in me. The specific patient thing that holds when you have spent your life being the capable one, the recoverable one, the one who can absorb the consequences of other people's choices. And that thing cracked. I looked at my parents. I looked at Madison, whose face had emerged from her hands now that the crying had produced the desired response from my mother. "I'm going to give Madison one chance," I said. My voice was very even. "She can go to the banks herself, confess to the fraud, and agree to a repayment plan. If she does that, I will cooperate with the civil resolution and not pursue criminal charges." Madison said no. She said it while still wet-eyed, still performing the affect of someone who is devastated. And she said it with the specific confidence of a person who has assessed the room and determined that the room will protect her. "You're going to ruin her life," my father said. "She already ruined mine," I said. I drove home. I called the fraud departments the next morning and told them I was not filing a dispute. I was filing a police report. Detective Renata Vasquez had been with the Columbus Division of Police Financial Crimes Unit for 14 years. She was the detective assigned to my case when I walked into the district headquarters at 9 a.m. on a Monday with my folder and my account statements and every piece of documentation I had been able to compile over the previous 5 days. She looked at the applications. She looked at the itemized statements. She looked at the delivery addresses, which her team would eventually connect to Madison's actual address and a storage unit 2 miles away. "Has the suspect been made aware you were coming in?" she said. "I told my family I was filing a report," I said, "which means yes." She nodded with the specific expression of a detective who has handled family fraud cases before and is familiar with how quickly information travels inside a family that is trying to manage an outcome. We'll move quickly then, she said. Is there any documentation of the handwriting being your sister's, beyond your personal identification of it? I had anticipated this. I had found, in an old box in my closet, 3 birthday cards from Madison spanning the last 8 years, each one in her handwriting, each one containing 7s with the European cross. I slid them across the desk. Vasquez looked at them, then at the applications. I'm going to get our document examiner to take a look, she said. But I'll be honest. From here, that's not a close call. The document examiner was specialist Thomas Okafor, 12 years with the Forensic Documents Division, who produced a written comparison analysis 6 days later, concluding with professional certainty that the handwriting on the 3 credit applications was the same hand as the birthday cards. I read the report at my desk at the firm, and then I sat very still for a while. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. My supervising attorney, Carol Hutchins, 22 years in civil litigation, a woman who has seen the full range of what people do to each other and who approaches it with the particular clear-eyed pragmatism of someone who deals in evidence, had been aware of what was happening since I first found the letter. She had offered the firm's resources where appropriate and had told me, early on, in the quiet way of someone who wants you to understand something important without being melodramatic about it. Emily, document everything. Every conversation, every communication from your family, every date and time. Start now. I had started then. I had a running document, date stamped, backed up in 2 locations, containing notes from every conversation with my parents, every text message, every voicemail. The text from my mother 3 days after the confrontation. Emily, please think about what you're doing to this family. The voicemail from my father. You know what this is going to do to Madison. Is that what you want? Not one message asking how I was. Not one message asking about the $78,000. I added them all to the document. Detective Vasquez called me on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks after I filed the report. We have enough, she said. We'll be making the arrest tomorrow. Madison was arrested on a Thursday morning. I know this because my mother called me at 9:47 a.m., not to ask how I was, not to say she understood now, but to say, in a voice that was more frightened than sad, they took her, Emily. They took her in handcuffs. How could you do this? I didn't answer the question because it wasn't a real question. I said, I'll see you at the arraignment. I went to the arraignment alone. I want to tell you what that was like. Walking into a courtroom by yourself to face your sister in a criminal proceeding, with your folder of documents and your 2 copies of the examiner's report, and the knowledge that you have done the right thing and that doing the right thing has cost you your family and possibly hasn't finished costing you yet. I want to tell you what it is to sit on the right side of a courtroom aisle and look at the empty seat beside you, where the people who should be there are not because they have decided that they are on the other side of this. I was composed. I had prepared to be composed. I had sat with Carol Hutchins the previous afternoon, and she had told me what to expect, what not to do, what the prosecutor's strategy was likely to be, and what to watch for from the defense. She had also said, with the quiet directness of someone who has watched enough courtroom proceedings to know what matters, whatever happens in there, do not react. Not to Madison, not to whatever her attorney says, not to anything your family does if they show up. A pause. And Emily, prepare yourself. They may show up. I had prepared myself. I had not fully prepared myself. The doors opened behind me at 10:08 a.m. My parents walked in dressed like they were going to church. My mother in the navy dress she wears for occasions she considers important. My father in the blazer he bought for my college graduation, which he attended and about which he has mentioned exactly once, in contrast to Madison's high school graduation, which he mentions at least twice a year. They walked past me. They sat on Madison's side. They did not look at me. My father looked straight ahead with the expression of a man who has made a decision and is committed to it. My mother, and this is the thing I keep returning to, the thing that I replay in the specific way you replay things that reveal something important. My mother looked at me as she passed, not with guilt, with the expression of a woman who has assessed the situation and decided on a strategy. They hadn't warned me. They hadn't even hesitated. Madison's attorney was a man named Jeffrey Stern, private defense attorney, presented himself as polished and confident, the specific confidence of someone who has handled cases like this before and has a script for how they go. He would claim, he said in his opening statement, that this was a family matter, that Emily had permitted Madison to use her information before a change of mind rooted in personal conflict had caused her to reframe the situation as fraud. I kept my face still. Then my father raised his hand. I want to give you the physical experience of watching your father raise his hand in a courtroom to testify against you, because I think it requires that specificity. He raised it like he was in school, formal, deliberate, the gesture of someone who has decided this is appropriate and wants the room to see that he believes so. The judge, the Honorable Patricia Ames, 21 years on the bench, a woman whose expression suggested she had seen most things and remained unimpressed by most of them, looked at him with the measured assessment of someone deciding whether to allow this. She allowed it. My father stood. He stood in that courtroom and he said, "Your Honor, Emily has always been jealous of her sister. Madison made poor choices, but Emily is vindictive. This is about Emily wanting to destroy our family." My mother nodded. She was crying softly, the specific soft crying of a performance being calibrated to the audience. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Marcus Webb, 11 years in the DA's office, a man I I had met twice before this, and who had told me exactly what Hutchins had told me about not reacting, sat completely still. I sat completely still. Then Judge Ames looked at my parents, not with anger, with the specific focused attention of a judge who has heard a statement that has raised a question she intends to ask. Before we proceed, she said, I have a question for the parents. The courtroom went quiet, not the ordinary quiet of a proceeding, the particular quality of quiet that a room produces when it understands something is about to happen. Judge Ames looked directly at my father, then at my mother. Did either of you know that Madison was using Emily's identity? She said, before the police report was filed. The question landed in the room the way a clear, specific question lands, when it has been carefully constructed to be unanswerable, without revealing something. My father opened his mouth, closed it. My mother's face changed. The crying stopped, and what replaced it was not composure. It was the expression of someone who has just understood that the performance they have been executing is about to produce a consequence they did not calculate for. The silence extended. I asked a very clear question, Judge Ames said. Her voice was entirely level. And I'll note that both of you have come before this court voluntarily and made statements on the record, which means you are subject to the same standards of honesty that govern all court proceedings. My mother pressed her hand over her mouth, not the gesture of someone overcome with emotion, the gesture of someone trying to prevent themselves from saying something. Jeffrey Stern, Madison's attorney, had gone completely still. Madison had turned in her seat and was looking at her own parents with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not the practiced vulnerability or the deployed charm, but something genuine and frightened and betrayed. The expression of someone who has just watched the people they were counting on accidentally drop them. My father looked at the judge. He looked at my mother. He looked at the floor. We knew she had opened a card or two, he said. The words were quiet, almost casual, in the tone of a man who has decided that minimization is still available as a strategy and is deploying it. A card or two, Judge Ames repeated, not as a question, as a repetition, the specific judicial repetition of words that are going to need to be examined more carefully than the speaker intended. Ada Marcus Webb stood. Your Honor, he said, given this admission, the prosecution requests the court consider whether the parents of the defendant may have had foreknowledge of and involvement in concealing the fraud. We also ask that today's testimony be preserved for potential use in any related proceedings. My father said something, the start of an objection, the instinct of a man who is used to being the loudest voice in a room, and who has not yet fully understood that this room has a different order. Judge Ames looked at him. He stopped. Stern was no longer looking confident. He was looking at his client with the expression of an attorney who has just watched his case change shape in a direction he had not prepared for. Madison was still turned in her seat, still looking at her parents. The expression on her face, I am going to tell you this because it is true and because truth is what this story is about, was not the expression I might have expected, which would be some form of anger or accusation. It was something smaller than that, something that looked, underneath everything else, like the expression of someone who has spent their entire life depending on a structure that has just failed them in public, who is, perhaps for the first time, sitting with the specific weight of that. I did not feel satisfaction at that expression. I am going to be honest about that too. I did not feel satisfied. What I felt was tired. The particular exhaustion of someone who has spent years doing the math on a relationship and has finally arrived at the number and found that the number is what they were afraid it would be. The proceeding ended. The judge set a follow-up date. The prosecutor's office indicated they would be investigating the parents' disclosure for potential obstruction and concealment charges. Jeffrey Stern gathered his papers with the focused efficiency of a man who needs to have a serious conversation with his client and is preparing for it. Outside the courtroom, in the corridor where the linoleum is gray and the fluorescent lights give everything the quality of something that happened a long time ago, my mother grabbed my arm. Her hand was cold. Her face was not performing anything anymore. The performance had stopped back in the courtroom, and what was left was the actual version, smaller, more frightened. Emily, she said, please. Her voice was low and urgent. You don't understand what this will do to us. I looked at her hand on my arm, then I pulled free. Not with force, simply by pulling away, the way you pull away from something that is holding you when you have decided it no longer has the right to. No, Mom, I said. You don't understand what you already did to me. I did not yell. I had prepared not to yell, and the preparation had held, but more than the preparation, I simply did not have yelling in me at that moment. What I had was the specific clarity of someone who has been through something that has burned away everything except what is actually true. I did not explain that $78,000 in stolen debt was not a misunderstanding. I did not explain what it had cost me, in credit and in sleep and in the specific quality of safety that you build over years, and that can be destroyed in 16 months by someone using your name. I did not beg them to choose me or explain why they should have or ask them to understand what they had done. I had spent a lifetime explaining things to people who had already decided not to understand. The evidence had spoken for itself. 6 months later, Madison accepted a plea agreement. The terms included restitution, a repayment schedule structured over 7 years that would not come close to being actually paid, in my assessment, but that exists on paper and provides me with legal recourse if she defaults. The plea included 3 years of probation and mandatory financial counseling, the irony of which I note without further comment. My parents were not charged. The prosecutor's investigation concluded that while their foreknowledge was demonstrated, the specific threshold for concealment charges charges was not met. I received this news from ADA Webb by phone on a Tuesday afternoon and sat with it for a while. Justice, I have learned from 9 years of working in litigation, is not a destination. It is a process with a settlement range. My credit score is being rebuilt. This is the accurate term for it. Rebuilt, with the specific patient labor of someone who has done it before and understands that it takes years and requires showing up every month without exception. I am at 683 as of last month. I know where I'm going. I know how long it will take. I have done this before. Carol Hutchins gave me more responsibility at the firm, not as a gesture of sympathy, as an assessment of demonstrated judgment. She had watched me navigate something complex, maintain composure throughout, document everything correctly, and make decisions that were difficult and right. She told me, in the brief way she tells me things that matter, "You handled that well." I have not spoken to my parents since the arraignment. They have called. My mother, twice. My father, once. I have listened to the voicemails and not called back, because there is nothing in the voicemails that requires a response. They are not apologies. They are requests for the return to a family arrangement that requires me to absorb the consequences of other people's choices, while being grateful for the opportunity to do so. I am done with that arrangement. I have a therapist now, Dr. Amara Osi, licensed psychologist, 12 years in practice, who specializes in family estrangement and financial trauma. She has the specific quality of someone who listens to the whole thing before she says anything, and who says things that are useful rather than comfortable. She asked me at our last session what I had learned from all of it. I thought about it for a moment. That the truth doesn't require an audience, I said. It just requires documentation. She wrote something down. The credit cards are being discharged through the fraud resolution process. The banks, once presented with the detective's report and the handwriting analysis, cooperated more fully than I expected, which is to say they cooperated like institutions that understand what their liability is when the fraud is clearly documented and the victim has the paper to prove it. My apartment is fine. My job is fine. My credit is recovering. My family is what it is.